Madeleine Vionnet was born in 1876 and grew up in Aubervilliers, France. Her family, originally from the Jura, was working class, and her parents separated when she was very young. She was only 12 when she started her first job working as a seamstress for a little store in Paris. Her father, who was a toll collector, had her working before the age of 12, doing what many young girls of little education did in those days. But even then, she had a highly focused, independent spirit and knew she wanted to design clothing. By 18, she got married and had a child, who wound up dying in infancy. She later divorced her husband in the end of the 19th century. Madeleine moved to London, where she worked with court dressmaker Kate Riley in the France dress shops. Riley, as with most English fashion houses at the time, specialized in copying French fashions. It was there that she learned the craft of dressmaking. She knew she wanted to be known as a dressmaker and not just a designer. Upon her return to France in 1900, she got a job with one of the major couture establishments in Paris, Callot Soiz, run by three sisters, of whom the senior was Madame Gerber. It was from her that Vionnet learned the high-end dressmaking and tailoring business which was to be her future. In 1912, Vionnet opened her own name fashion house at 222 Rue de Rivoli. Within the 2 years before World War I, she'd gathered a loyal clientele, but there was no question of her continuing her trade during the war years, which she largely spent in Rome. Vionnet's creations were a stark contrast to the overly adorned fashions of the pre-war period. They evoked a new form of femininity that spoke of freedom, independence, and experimentation. Her four principles of dressmaking were proportion, movement, balance, and truth. Referencing back to the classical ideas of purity and beauty, she applied these principles to create innovative and progressive garments that presented a modern vision of the fashion body. Bias cutting was used before Vionet's time for small trims, shirt cuffs, ruffles along the hem, etc. But she was the first to craft entire garments using this construction technique. As women made strides towards liberation at the beginning of the 20th century, they needed clothes that progressed in equal measure. Vionnet was famed for her innovative dressmaking techniques. The aesthetic simplicity of her designs was underpinned by an incredible level of structural complexity, particularly with regard for her original use of the bias cut. This technique required Vionnet to cut, drape, and pin fabric onto a wooden doll, working on the round instead of a two-dimensional surface. Her use of bias cutting resulted in designs that fitted the wearer's body flawlessly, without the need for complex undergarments or corsetry. The fabric would be cut and then hung in the studio for a full week, allowing gravity to pull the fabric up to its final length before being worked into a finished piece, a crucial step that, if skipped, would lead to the garment warping over time. The finished result, a timeless Vionnet, poured over the body like a second skin, highlighting the wearer's best features and eliminating her worst, while allowing for unrestricted movement, a principle her future designers would explore and advance. This became one of the most important things to have in fashion mobility. As her business expanded, Vionnet's original address at Rue de Rivoli could no longer accommodate her ever-increasing workforce. She had 1,200 workers by 1923. Expanding her business rapidly, she had to increase workspace. In 1926, Vionnet launched the first all-bias cut dress. In 1927, Vionnet opened a school within her couture house to teach apprentices how to create clothing on the bias. It wasn't until then that Vionnet realized she had a love for teaching dressmaking. With additional investments, Vionnet opened her new premise at 50 Avenue Montague. The 5-story building, constructed of stone and steel, featured over 20 ateliers, each assigned to cater for specific tasks, such as dresses, coats, furs, and lingeries. Vionnet's most notable and long-standing collaboration was with the artist, designer, and illustrator Thiat. As well as designing the company's logo, Bayat's relationship with the Maison can be traced through his sketches of Vionnet's designs published in the prominent fashion magazine La Gazette du Bon Ton. Plagiarism has always been a problem in high fashion, and Madeleine Vionnet's huge success in high profile made her a great target for copyists, especially from the US. To solve the problem, she put her exact fingerprint on the label of each of her dresses. Vionet's working ethics extended beyond her fight against plagiarism. She was also a pioneer when it came to social welfare. The house provided free meals, coffee breaks, and paid holidays to their staff. At a time when stools were common at the workplace, Vionnet provided chairs with backrests for its entire staff. In 1939, the 63-year-old Vionnet decided to close her business and retire. She lived in relative reclusiveness, avoiding most social events. She did, however, teach dressmaking and pattern cutting. She donated the entirety of her archive, including 120 dresses.